This chart tracks the American economy since 1979, revealing a strange contradiction. The top line shows a steady climb in net productivity. Workers are generating more value, output, and profit than at any point in history. But the bottom line, representing typical worker compensation, has flatlined. Corporations classify these employees as assets or human resources. This terminology treats people as a raw material, an input required to run a machine. For a modern firm driven by private equity and inflation, profit maximization requires minimizing the single largest operational cost. In almost every industry, that cost is human labor. Labor follows the same economic laws of supply and demand as any other commodity. To permanently drop the price of a resource, an executive must flood the market with a massive supply of it. The stagnation of middle-class wages is the result of a deliberate mathematical strategy. By oversupplying the labor pool, companies have systematically stripped workers of their bargaining power. The first supply shock to the modern labor market arrived in the mid-20th century as organized corporate interests advocated for the dismantling of the family wage. This shift effectively doubled the size of the domestic labor pool as women entered the corporate workforce in record numbers. Sociologists analyzing 50 years of U.S. Census data have quantified a devaluation effect. As specific occupations feminize and the available labor pool expands, employers systematically drop the relative pay for those roles, regardless of the skill required. Globalization allowed corporations to bypass domestic boundaries. Through offshoring and import competition, local workers were forced to compete against a low-wage global population. Every percentage point increase in low-wage imports is linked to statistically significant drops in local pay. Corporations expanded this supply further through guest worker programs like H-1B visas and undocumented immigration. These policies import a global reserve army of labor directly into the domestic market, providing replacements for workers who demand higher pay. This illustrates a rule of thumb from Harvard economist George Borges. If immigrants increase the supply of workers in a particular skill group by 10%, the wage of that group drops by 3 to 4%. For native-born workers who didn't finish high school, the impact is closer to a 9% reduction. By removing household and international boundaries, corporations multiplied the number of bodies competing for the same paycheck, tilting the scales toward capital. Inside the firm, companies use domestic outsourcing and subcontracting to create what academics call the fissured workplace. This allows core firms to shed non-core functions and strip workers of labor market rents. The wage penalty for this outsourcing ranges from 7 to 40%. A security guard or janitor working for a contractor earns significantly less than a direct hire, even when they are guarding the same doors or cleaning the same desks. Modern flat management structures further this dynamic by forcing peers to fight laterally against one another for promotions and compensation rather than climbing a traditional hierarchical ladder. This internal discipline is often reinforced through demographic segmentation. By organizing corporate initiatives around identity categories, management can inadvertently place different groups in competition for institutional recognition, which can obscure the shared economic interests necessary for collective bargaining. Automation, AI, and robotics represent the next phase of labor expansion. These technologies systematically replace human tasks and commoditize specialized knowledge, further reducing the demand for human workers. The economic findings of Acemoglu and Restrepo show a clear wage penalty for this replacement. Every additional robot per 1,000 workers reduces average wages by nearly 0.5%. Whether through temp agencies, internal identity segmentation, or algorithmic replacement, workplace innovations over the last 40 years have consistently manufactured inescapable competition among workers. Global economic elites openly acknowledge the relationship between labor oversupply and wage suppression. In 1997, former Federal Reserve Chair Alan Greenspan testified that corporate profit margins remained high due to an atypical restraint on compensation. He directly linked this to greater worker insecurity. During a 2016 hearing in the UK Parliament, business leader Lord Stuart Rose affirmed the basic microeconomic reality of this strategy. If you are short of labor, the price of labor will go up. More recently, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva have advocated for increased immigration to check wage pressures and ease labor shortages. As J.D. Vance has noted, Western economies have developed a dependence on the crutch of cheap labor, whether through offshoring or importing laborers willing to work for low wages. A worker's value is derived from their scarcity. To reclaim a share of corporate wealth, the workforce must reject manufactured divisions, build solidarity, and demand scarcity in the labor market.